There's glitter on the floor after the party once again. I can feel my chest tightening as I take in my surroundings. My eyes feel warm as tears threaten to spill from their vulnerable shell. How many times had I warned myself to not follow the same path that led me here? And how many more times will I continue to ignore my best intentions? A sight pulls me temporarily from my sorrow as I stand on the second floor railing overlooking the floor below. A few girls with distressed hair and makeup, smeared badly enough for me to see, are carrying their shoes down in the lobby in an attempt to flee the hotel as quickly as possible with no regard to the pools of blood staining their party gowns or their bare feet. The incident should have happened at exactly 12:02 a.m., yet the clock on my smartwatch states that it's already a little after 9 in the morning. Cautiously, I take the stairs down to the first floor and head in the opposite direction of the girls. The incident, if one can call an event that continuously reoccurs an incident, typically occurs in the ballroom. And judging by the way that the trail of blood is flowing, it appears that history has once again repeated. At this point, I would typically sleep the day away so that I could wake once more on January 2nd, 2023, and avoid the nightmare altogether. However, curiosity has left me feeling particularly active. Something about this morning made the gruesome sights seem less vivid, less foreboding, as I had felt in times before. When I first stirred from bed and felt compelled to check the scene, I thought that I was perhaps becoming desensitized to the event, or worse yet, morbidly curious. However, watching the girls gave me confirmation that maybe, for the first time in a long time, that everything had changed. I pull on the door to the ballroom, prepared to see the sight that has so sealed my memory, while still hoping for a different outcome. Some glimmer of hope that I had not fallen prey to the same actions that led me here year after year, and this hellish year-long repetition that has happened for the past 5 years. As the door creaks open, the methemoglobin scent of metallic rust hits my nasal cavities like a warning trigger, urging me to turn back around and get into my bed where I knew that I would be safe. I want to run, but I can feel a force drawing me further into the room. It was as if the memories from the past 5 years had compounded into a singular force to hold my body against my will and propel me forward. Although it had been a few months since I had heard from him, I still recognized that the laughter echoing throughout the room belonged to him. The inner voice inside of my head warned me that I needed to let the actions of the day unfurl instead of ignoring them, and that I would gain nothing if I continued to ignore my mistakes. The room looked slightly different than I had remembered it from past memory. The room itself was particularly enchanting on its better days, with gorgeous columns that stretched to the ceiling, marble floors, crown molding, and other beautiful decorum that you would only see somewhere glamorous. But now, all of that beauty has been washed and transformed into something dark and foreboding. The white marble once pristine is now covered with massacred bodies, ripped to shreds, left lazily discarded throughout the room. To my distressed eyes, the scene looks as if the same beast from years ago had overindulged in a feeding frenzy, caring nothing for those that it had slain. Smeared bloody handprints of victims further shows a sense of sadistic splendor, a sight that so easily reads that the unlucky few who had tried to muster their courage to crawl away were only made to make it so many paces before their fingers were chopped off. The fingers were not hard to find, scattered and buried in the scalp skulls with remnants of sticky gray matter soaking in liquid drool as if something had used the fingers as a serving knife and looked at it lazily before moving on to the next dish. I had seen this all before, and although the images haunted my nightmares, this was the first time that I had seen it in years, and the sight was much worse than I had remembered. Each and every one of my closest friends slain for me to find. A personal message meant for me to find, to torment me for the rest of eternity. Before I could stop myself, I began heaving onto the floor as the sights and the smell of iron from the glitter-stained blood made my head swell with intense agony and sorrow. With each hurl, I cursed myself for breaking my vow to isolate myself this past year, to not talk to a single soul. If I had just stuck to the original plan, then maybe I could have saved my friends and family from this horrendous end. I can feel the shame of my weakness surging through my body. Each heave made my body shake, and eventually my knees gave way. My body feels pale as I begin to fall forward, and I crash onto the floor. I awake, dumbfounded, to the familiar date of January 2nd, 2023. I scream in my frustration, throwing my phone across the room in my fury. This date is burned into me, a curse that I am meant to relive without reprieve. The plot had moved forward yesterday, and there had been a moment where I had felt as if there had been hope. I tried to cling to the memory, to try to remember what all I had done differently, to try to help myself this year. A journal rests on my nightstand, and I quickly act to jot down notes for my future self, certain that the memory would fade from me, leave me once again scrambling in the dark. Do not host a New Year's party. Don't date Maxwell. He is a... But, like a thought on the tip of one's tongue, I tried to find the words to describe what exactly Maxwell is, but I can no longer remember. I stare at the note, but it makes no sense to me at all. I tried to recall the reason for why I had written it, but the thought is completely lost on me. Had it been a dream, or was it some sort of premonition? My head is pounding against my skull as I make my way to the kitchen to prepare coffee, to try to allow myself to wake up and to try to work off the massive hangover that I felt. Memories of the night before seem completely blocked, as if I had been blackout drunk. I check my phone for text messages that might hint at what had happened, but all I see are texts from the 31st, as if the 1st of January 2023 had never happened. I think about calling Maxwell, but the thought of the note left me feeling a bit ill at ease. Before I have a chance to make a decision, a knock on my front door breaks me from my mental fog, and I run to open it in hopes of gaining a clearer answer. Maxwell is at the door, and he is smiling at me with his brilliant, monster-like grin. His hair is unkempt, as if he had rushed over here without showering, eager to come be with me and show his commitment to me as we enter into this new year. All thoughts of worry about the note disappear as I pull him into the house and into my embrace. He begins kissing me with a passionate fury in a way that seems almost territorial, an unspoken commentary about how I am his and how he will never let me go. My body responds eagerly as I let him pick me up and carry me back to my bedroom. Glitter falls from my hair onto my pillow as I lie quivering on the bed, marveling over how his body has taken over my own. He gently brushes the hair from my face as more glitter covers the bed. I smile at him as I weakly run my finger over his cheek. I wish I could spend each day like this with you, I say to him as he pulls me deeper into his embrace. I wish that we could too, Maxwell says with a voice full of sorrow. Our relationship was not conventional, and although we loved each other, it had been difficult to maintain the relationship because of the added stress. Maxwell was as good as divorced, and although his wife knew about our relationship and even approved of our union, our family and friends tended to err more on the side of caution. On good days, we would lie in bed together, wrapped in each other's arms, and we would daydream about what a life would be like for us without the secrecy and the judgment from others. I wish I could meet the versions of us in an alternate timeline who managed to get together before you ever married Lola and before you began running for mayor. I bet that they aren't even aware of just how lucky they are that they are able to go out in public, eat at restaurants, and go on other dates like a normal couple. I really hate that other bitch version of myself sometimes. I know, sweetheart, he says as he pulls me closer to him. You know there's a chance that I'll lose and that all of our troubles will be behind us sooner rather than later. A selfish part of me wanted to believe him, but there was a part of me that somehow knew that Maxwell would win the candidacy. Him winning the candidacy meant one thing for us, and that was that we would still have to keep our relationship hidden for years to come. Both of us knew that staying in the relationship was unhealthy for both of us. A life of secrecy only puts more stress on the relationship, and even talking about Maxwell's failure seemed like a cruel disservice to who he was as a person. But as unhealthy as the relationship was for both of us, neither of us felt as if we were strong enough to pull away from the other. It felt as if the universe had conspired to make us fall in love no matter how hard we both tried to fight it. The two of us were magnetically drawn to one another, and it was bullshit that his wife was the least of our issues. It was punishment enough that we had to keep our relationship private. Staying apart from one another would just be complete torture. If his wife, Lola, had just told him that she had wanted a divorce when she first started having the thought, rather than the day of his candidacy announcement, then we could be together without issue. I had been instantly drawn to him since we had first met. Our parents had been childhood friends, and they had met sporadically with each other throughout our childhoods. Maxwell was 6 years older than me, and although I had always thought that he was cute, it was more of a fanciful childhood crush. I never thought that he would ever like me in that way considering the age gap. I was satisfied just being his friend, be that on Facebook or in real life. Through social media, we stayed connected, and when my job transferred me to his city, we agreed to meet up so that he could show me around the area. Although we had gotten along well, we did not end up speaking again for over a year, and even then, it had been a complete coincidence. We saw each other at a coffee shop and ended up chatting with each other for longer than either of us had intended. Throughout the conversation, I could not help but to feel my childhood crush resurface and to feel a slight tinge of jealousy that he had a wedding ring on his finger. As we were leaving, he asked if I was seeing anyone and if the two of us would be interested in coming over one evening for a couple's game night. When I told him that I was single, he became more standoffish and excused himself in a rush without resuming contact later. We didn't see each other again until last Thanksgiving. My parents had the idea to take a cruise with our whole family and to invite Maxwell's family to come along as well. I agreed to the cruise as an excuse to meet and greet with other singles, and it was a genuine surprise when Maxwell walked into the lobby. Not only had he just announced his mayoral candidacy and should have been busy with his campaign, but he also had shown up alone and without Lola. We were the only members of the 40 and younger crowd on the ship, and so we spent our time together drinking our way through the cruise's beverage package, away from his normal sense of responsibility, and with some help from his third Mai Tai. He broke down and explained to me that his wife, Lola, told him that she no longer wanted to be in the marriage. He didn't go into details about her reasoning, but he did say that although she was certain in her decision, that she would pretend to still be in love with him for the public as a final favor with intent to divorce sometime after the election. I listened to him with increasing intrigue as he poured his heart out about the marriage and how he too thought that the relationship had been dead for a while. He stated that he should have known that the marriage was failing since Lola had never expressed desire to start a family with him, nor had he felt any desire to have children with her. He talked about how he thought that this lack of passion led to him gaining a passion instead for the city and to change it for the better. The wind stung bitterly at our skin as we sat on the boat dock, and although we could have gone inside, we found ourselves seeking warmth from each other instead. We were each other's secret on the cruise, and although it was supposed to be a 1 week fling, we kept finding excuses to talk afterwards until eventually we were too intertwined to be unwound. Tears began to soak my face as I stare into his yellow gold eyes. Are you sure that we can be together after the election is over? Never one for hiding the truth in his emotion, he let me cry onto his shoulder. I don't know, Scarlett. I wish I could tell you what happens when I win and that we can be together, but I think that it's ultimately up to you and about how much you can endure. I'm so tired of having to hide this. I love you more than anything else, and I would do anything for you. But I'm so tired. I know, he says as he kisses my forehead and holds me tenderly in his embrace. I know. I'm so sorry that you have to go through this and that it could be years to come before we can be a proper couple. Maybe you should think about finding someone else, someone that you can be with and be happy with in a normal, traditional way. The note from earlier flashes into memory. Maxwell, you would tell me if you wanted to break up with me, wouldn't you? He stares back at me, dumbfounded. I mean, you wouldn't string me along, right? You wouldn't string me along the same way that you did Lola? There's anger in his voice as he responds. No, Scarlett. I would never do that to you. The fact that you have to ask is insulting. He begins to get out of bed and grabs his clothes from off of the floor. I have to go. I can't be here right now, he says without allowing me to protest. Stubborn urge to ignore him until he apologized washed over me, resulting in a 3-day hiatus before I finally decided to message him. He seemed reluctant to come over through messages, and his demeanor seemed just as cold when he came to my house. I watch as he carefully chooses a chair instead of the couch to prevent us from being able to sit next to each other. I can feel a rush of anxiety rush over me. I had been angry at him, but had my behavior been enough to make him reconsider our relationship? I think back to the conversation that we had had before he stormed off. It had been a bit inconsiderate of me to compare our relationship to the one that he had had with Lola. But had it not been a valid concern, the relationship was difficult for both of us, and he had stayed in a loveless relationship before. He said that he would never string me along, but refusing to talk to me for 3 days after a small fight seemed like overkill. I had to talk with him cordially, but all I notice is him in a chair. Uncertainty floods over me. He hadn't hugged me when he walked in. It felt like I would be unable to even touch him. "Are you breaking up with me?" I blurt out without thinking. His face turns blood red as he stares at me with his piercing eyes. "Are you fucking kidding me?" "What? You didn't hug me, you haven't talked to me, and you sat on a chair." "I don't care about the chair. You didn't text me, nor did you hug me when I came in either, you know." I feel embarrassed. He's right. I had decided to not text him for days because of some stupid sense of selfishness. Whatever was meant by the note on my bedside table probably meant nothing, and I had let a dream influence the scope of our relationship. "I'm sorry," I find myself saying. "I'm sorry, I just wanted you to text me back first for once." It feels like it's always me and that I'm the only one putting in the work, even though I know that that's not true. It just feels like you're going to break up with me. There's silence as we both study each other for a moment. The future of our relationship is a conversation that we have fairly frequently. But there's something about this one that seems as if there could be actual repercussions. He seems cold, and I begin panicking as I wonder if I will ever feel his embrace or be the reason why he smiled or laughed ever again. Had I hurt him more than I thought that I had? And had he been spending the last few days deciding if this was worth it? His next words confirm my thoughts. "Scarlett, I don't think that we can continue dating, and I'm really sorry. This relationship is clearly unfair to you, and you have insecurities about the fact that I am still married to Lola and that she is on my arm in public. I know that it's for the press, but I can't be the reason why you hurt any longer." I stare at him in disbelief. This can't be happening, especially not after I had been so patient with him for so long and had finally been able to enter into a relationship with the guy that I felt was the perfect man for me. I tell him to stay there as I run to my room to grab all of the letters that I had written to him. "Do you see these?" I ask as my nostrils flare. "These are the letters that I wrote to you and to my future self about our relationship and how it would work out. I want to marry you," I say as I fight the tears threatening to fall. He gives me a sympathetic look as I read a letter out loud. "Scarlett, don't you see that this is exactly why we can't be together? This relationship is hurting you. You're having to write reminders for yourself about why we should be together. It shouldn't be this complicated." I shove the letters at him and yell at him to get out of my house. He makes an attempt to comfort me, but the rage I feel is unshakable as I practically shove him out of my home. It took until after Valentine's Day before I could admit to anyone that we had broken up. And when I did, I felt a new wave of sadness rush over me. Although I know that my friends ultimately only want what is best for me, hearing them talking about how Maxwell was no good for me and that it was for the best that we broke up was almost more unbearable than the breakup itself. When the Uber dropped me off from our belated Valentine's dinner, I went home, uncorked a bottle of wine, and began rereading the letters that I had written to Maxwell and allowed myself to mourn our breakup all over again. The love that I had felt for him had not waned, and it was hard for me to imagine that he wasn't feeling the same way that I was currently. A stupid urge compels me to pick up my phone from where I had left it on the bedside table to call him. As my note that I had written to myself on January 2nd falls, smudged and unreadable, to the floor, leaving a trail of glitter in its wake. Maxwell and I meet up the next day, and we are back in each other's lives once again. His laughter is an intoxicating nectar to my ears, and my body finds rhythm with his as if we had never parted. I watch him as he gets dressed and notice glitter on his shirt that I hadn't noticed before. "Did you have a wild night out the last night that you wore that shirt?" I ask him as I move to brush the glitter off of it. "What are you doing?" he asks. "You have glitter on your shirt. Did you go to a strip club or something?" I ask, hoping desperately that he will say no. Yes, I, mayoral candidate Maxwell Fisher, went out for a wild night at the strip club instead of spending Valentine's Day with my wife. God, you politicians have it so easy, I tease, suddenly wondering if he had seen someone else since they had been together last. But seriously, this is so much glitter. "It has to be yours," he says, laughing. "Did you go to a strip club for Valentine's Day?" "Oh, you know me. I just love the strip clubs." I laugh back. "But seriously, I haven't seen any action at all since we broke up." "I've only seen my sock, so I know what you mean." "Gross," I say, delighted. "So Lola didn't come crawling back to you?" "The only person desperate enough to do that is you, Miss Midnight Phone Call." "Are you saying that booty calls actually work on you? This is a triumph for men everywhere." "I wouldn't say that, but it does seem to be working for one very persistent lady," he says as he pulls me back onto the bed for a second time. Whatever hope I had had that we were in the process of resuming our relationship turned out to be false. Maxwell responded to my messages, and he would come over on occasion, but it wasn't as frequent nor as personal as it had been before our breakup in January. If I wanted to see him, then I had to be the one to initiate the interactions, and he no longer asked to stay the night. I wanted to ask him about his endgame, but I was nervous that doing so would result in me never being able to see him again. We kept up our song and dance until August, 6 months of uncertainty of his feelings with increasing distance between our meetings. The campaign was picking up, and it seemed as if he had a real chance of winning the general election. The same itching thought that part of me knew the election results and the outcome came to me. I think again about the note that I had found on the day that Maxwell and I had broken up. I began searching my room for the note, and as hours pass, so too does my frenzy as I begin tearing the house apart in a desperate search, now thoroughly convinced that the fate of my relationship was written clearly on that page. I stumble upon a box that I only remember through vaguest memory, and as I begin to open it, I feel overwhelmed by a sudden sense of dread. Glitter is lightly dusted on the box's lid, and it reminds me of the story of Pandora's box. In this story, the gods presented Pandora with a box that they told her was filled with special gifts that she was never to open. Eventually, curiosity overwhelms her. When she opens the lid, she releases illnesses and hardships into the world. I shake the box, suddenly unsure of whether or not I should open it. Multiple somethings move around inside as more glitter falls to the floor. The box is in my house, so it must belong to me. I try my best to shake the feeling of dread that overcomes me. Reason dictates that there should be nothing in the box that would make me feel this way. After all, it is mine, isn't it? Temporarily, I toss aside the feelings that shook me to my core, and I was thankful for a chance to distract myself in the pursuit of the letter. Still, my fingers tremble as I remove the lid and reveal the contents inside. Inside of the box are a multitude of Polaroid photos of Maxwell and me living our lives in 2023. I pull out the photos as a sense of creeping fear washes over me as my mind slowly begins to understand what my eyes were seeing. Someone had been watching Maxwell and me throughout the year. There were photos of him with his tousled hair as I remembered it from January 2nd, and it was dated as such. The photos grew increasingly more disturbing the more that I looked through them. Not only were there photos of Maxwell at my front door, but there were also photos taken from the window, photos of his car, at my house, and even some from inside of the house itself. Photos of him getting undressed, photos of us naked on the bed, and all matters of other erotic, private, personal moments. I was vulnerable prey, being bitten by a snake. I fling the box away from me with a sudden, violent motion in order to repel it away from me. However, the damage had already been done. Someone had been in my house and had taken photos of me. Unsure of what to do, I head for the door as quickly as possible and lock the door behind me. I had only been to Maxwell's house once, and I began to drive aimlessly in the direction that I thought that it might be. Luckily, the house is unmistakable, with its Vote for Fisher signs lining the lawn. I park my car on the street, and I reconsider if I had made the right decision, but only for an instant. If there was someone stalking us, then he needed to know as well, and so too did Lola. I ring the doorbell and wait for someone to arrive, and it is Lola who eventually opens the door. She's wearing a bathrobe that is open enough for me to see that she is wearing a negligee underneath. I'm sorry, I mumble, suddenly feeling significantly less confident about my desire to talk to Maxwell at his house than I had felt before. I needed to talk to Maxwell about something, and I rushed over here without thinking. Lola's face is pink, and her breath smells of champagne as she beckons me inside. Are you sure it's okay that I come in? I ask, uncertain if I should be here. She guides me through the foyer and into the living room without saying a word. Something seems wrong about the situation, and for the first time, I begin to get a sense that Maxwell might have been lying to me about his relationship with his wife. She sits down in the middle of the couch before lounging back as she puts the glass of champagne that she had been sipping back to her lips. I take the seat opposite of her, unsure of whether I should be the one to talk first or not. After a while of idle silence and a glass consumed, she finally begins to speak to me. So, you're looking for our Maxwell, are you? Yes, I gulp, wondering if I should just get up and leave. A feeling of entrapment dances over me. Had she hired a private investigator? And had she meant for me to find the photos? What would happen to Maxwell if they were found? It's a private matter that I need to talk to him about alone. Why? She says with a slurriness to her speech. Should I do that? Don't you get enough of alone time with my husband? I get some alone time with my boyfriend, yes. I know that he's your husband, but he told me that you approved of us and that you wanted a divorce. You stupid bitch! Lola snarls. He's been wanting to fuck you since he first gave you a tour of the city. I didn't let him go. We had one argument over you where I told him that if he wanted you so badly, then he should just go and be with you. And then he went off and did it. Well, I start as the angry beast within me begins to rear its head. You did tell him to come be with me. If you didn't want that, then maybe you shouldn't have said anything. I try to tell myself to stop talking, but the thought of her invading my privacy, having someone take photos of me, and potentially still sleeping with Maxwell was making my head spin. I could no longer think straight. Had he been ignoring me and only coming over on occasion because he was back with his wife? Had he ever truly left? I think back about our conversation on the cruise and how emotional he had seemed. Should I have realized then that he was moving on too soon? At first, I thought that it was just going to be some sort of casual fling, but then he kept coming back, and it seemed as if I truly had had what I wanted. Had my friends and family been right in thinking that we shouldn't be together? Would I have known better if I was older? I had trusted him full-heartedly. My head felt dizzy as Lola began her retort, but I only catch parts of it. Her words make no sense to me as I try to concentrate. You're doomed to repeat this lesson again and again if you don't change, silly girl. And your silly little girl games are going to get every little person hurt that you know. But don't worry, no one has to remember. Only me and him. She continues to talk, and none of it makes sense. All I can see are visions of Maxwell leaving my house and going back to his own to be with her. She hands me the bottle of champagne, and I chug eagerly from the bottle, and then another, until my mind goes black. It's October now, and I have not heard from either Maxwell nor Lola. The runoff elections are being shown live as I watch it with disdain. I voted for Maxwell, of course, but the only thing that I wanted was to be there with him, encouraging him, even though I knew that that was no longer an option for me. The Polaroids had been removed from my home, and there was no trace of the box anywhere. I kept the blinds closed and the deadbolt secured, and there was scarcely any part of me that felt alive anymore. Maxwell won the election as my mental health continued to falter. As October turned to November, and November to December, I had refused to go home for Thanksgiving, and I tried to wash the day away in a drunken stupor. But even doing so reminded me too much of Maxwell and of the time that we had spent together, getting drunk on the cruise. It wasn't until mid-December, when news broke that Lola had died, that I began to take any interest in life again. The incident had happened back in September, and had been ruled to be death by a venomous snake that had attacked her when she was home alone. Maxwell had managed to keep the news hidden, and investigative reporters were beginning to speculate his integrity and if he had kept it hidden just to win the election. Certain groups were throwing around the words, recall election, and I could not help but to wonder about how Maxwell was feeling about the whole affair. Although it seemed obvious now that he had been lying to both his wife and to me, my entire soul still felt as if I belonged to him, and I began to ache for him and wonder how he was coping with it all. I call him, unsure if he will answer or not, and am pleasantly surprised when his voice answers on the other line. Hey, I heard the news about Lola. How are you doing? It's been difficult, Scarlett. I had already felt like I had lost her, but to lose her again has been hard to bear. It feels awkward to talk to him about his late wife, but my desire to talk to him about anything at all wins out. Have you had anyone to talk to about it? No, not really. I found her in September, dressed in negligee with champagne poured over her. I thought at first that she may have been passed out or blacked out from the alcohol. When I made to wake her up and to take her to the hospital, I realized that she was cold. I had been gone that week from my non-mayoral job, so it was a shock to come home to. I held her for a moment, and that was when I noticed that she was no longer breathing, and that there were puncture wounds in her neck. That sounds awful, I say to him in genuineness. Thank you. It was awful. My advisors warned me not to speak about the incident to anyone until after the election, so I never said a word to anyone, not even to her family. Now that the news is out, I don't blame anyone for wanting to recall me. It was a stupid mistake to think that hiding the death of my wife would ever win me any favor. Although I was no longer in love with her, I still loved her, and it was foolish of me to not give her the respect that she deserves. His words catch me off guard as I tried to take in everything that he was saying to me. Was it possible that Lola had lied and that I had let her influence my opinions of Maxwell? I was beginning to feel less sorry for her and happier for me. If he found her in negligee after being gone for a week, was it possible that that was the same week that I had visited her? Not wanting to upset him, I decided to keep that information to myself. Do you want to talk about this in person? I asked him. Honestly, I would love that. I no longer feel like I have to be careful when I see you. There's a nice Italian place that I've wanted to take you. I agreed to meet him later that night and hang up the phone to get ready. The conversation had gone better than I had hoped that it would, and I feel a sense of glee as I let the warmth of the shower wash over me. I know that I should feel guilty, but the happiness is intoxicating. When I finish showering, I walk into my bedroom to change clothes, and I am met with a sickening sight. There's a Polaroid of me talking with Lola in her house. I have very few memories of that night, but whoever the photographer was clearly held them for me. Quickly, I snagged the photo and put it through the shredder, hoping beyond hope that no other photos had been taken that night. I studied Maxwell at the restaurant. The sexual tension between the two of us is almost unbearable, as I notice him looking at me with an insatiable hunger that no food could possibly satisfy. I tried to keep my focus, engaging him in conversation about his new responsibilities as mayor, congratulating him for a job well earned, but my fear of the photo being seen by Maxwell overwhelms me. I want to say something to him, but the thought of him getting up and leaving in anger over the fact that I spoke with Lola, or him realizing that I temporarily stopped trusting him, left me silent. We were finally back together. I didn't want anything to come between us. When the bill is paid, his hungry eyes are still fixated on me as he asks if I have time to come over to his house for a nightcap. I bite my lip with eagerness as the word yes slips from my lips far too quick. He laughs at my need as he leans forward to whisper, "I'll see you soon," into my ear. I arrive soon after him, and once we are inside, it takes no time for the months of longing to draw us back into each other's arms. I go in for a hug as he pulls me tight against him, unwilling to let me go. Although I remembered that he was strong, I had forgotten just how strong he truly was. I felt like he could snap me in half easily if he wanted, and as he began to kiss me and push me down onto the couch in the living room, I had a strong urge to let him break me in whatever way he felt was most fitting. His teeth began to suck at my neck as my body responded strongly to his touch, remembering just how long it had been since I had been last consumed by him. He leaves his mark on my body, and I know then that it was foolish of me to ever not trust him. "Now, I believe that you came over here for a nightcap," he says with a devilish grin. When he returns, my body is still comatose as he whispers into my ear, "Drink up. I'm not even close to being done with you yet." My legs shake uncontrollably as he does, as my mind distractedly races about what had happened and what was to come, making it so I could not hear the words that he said next, which were, "You look just like her, lying here, so full of ecstasy, and so foolishly unaware of what happens next." He carries me to the master bedroom, and I suddenly feel very drunk. I can feel my stomach trying to heave, and I tell Maxwell that I feel sick, as he tells me to hold on. Soon after, he comes back in with something in his hands. One by one, he begins to layer my naked body with Polaroid photos. They were photos that had previously been in the shoebox, but there were also more that I hadn't seen. There were photos of my time here with Lola, and to my worst of fears, there were more that I hadn't seen. "Well, what are those?" I managed to stammer. "Oh, my dear Scarlett, the best is yet to come," he says as he covers my mouth with his hand and bites down hard, but not hard enough to leave damage, on my nipple. Waving a photo in front of my face of him on top of Lola, biting into her neck while suffocating her, with me passed out on the chair that I had been sitting in on the night that I had come over back in September. I pass out soon, not unlike I had the night in the photo. I wake the next morning to a platter of eggs and bacon in bed with a steaming cup of coffee. "What happened last night?" I ask, rubbing my head and noticing that there's a knot. "I'm not sure. I went downstairs to grab us another drink, and I found you passed out. I watched you to make sure that you were okay, and I got you dressed. How are you feeling? Do you remember hitting your head?" I don't remember much of anything, honestly. "Can you do me a favor and run your fingers through your hair and check for a knot? I thought that I felt one last night, but I don't want to touch it again and risk hurting you." Even though I already know there's not there, I do as he tells me to do. At least that explains why I feel so disoriented. And it might even explain why I passed out, but still, I feel embarrassed. This wasn't how I intended my first night back with him to go. As if he could read my mind, he told me not to feel embarrassed and told me that he would be happy to take care of me for the rest of our life. I eat my breakfast as I tried to piece together what had happened the night before. I feel a slight tenderness at my bosom, and I excuse myself to go to the bathroom. As I check myself in the mirror and run my fingers over the spot, a memory flashes of Maxwell shoving his hand over my mouth and telling me something as he bit down on it. I try to remember more, but I find that I am unable to do so. I return to the room and tell him with urgency that I forgot that I needed to be taking care of my friend's cat. He offers to go with me, but I tell him no since she has cameras and did not consent for me to bring anyone else over. He calls me later that night, but I do not answer. He continues to call until I eventually block his number. I have no evidence to support that he roofied me, and there could be any number of explanations for what my memory was telling me happened, especially since there had been a knot. But still, I felt as if something had happened, and that there was something dangerous about Maxwell. I vowed to not see him again, and he seemed to respect my privacy. That was until the day of my birthday, New Year's Eve. Although it was meant to be a surprise, I somehow knew that day that my friends were throwing me a surprise birthday party, and that they had arranged for Maxwell to be the one to take me to the private event space where my friends and family would greet me, and that they would tell me that they had seen how Maxwell handled the event of his wife's passing, and that they now realized he was genuinely a good guy, and that they supported us together as a birthday sentimental sort of thing. It wasn't that I wasn't thankful for them, and under normal circumstances, I would be thrilled with all of their efforts. But right now, for whatever reason, it felt like punishment. It felt like punishment for my infidelity, and it felt like punishment that I had not been honest with them about the scope of our relationship. And it felt like punishment that I had lied to Maxwell about seeing Lola. The same part of me that knew that they were throwing me a party also had a sickening feeling that something was going to go horribly wrong tonight, although I wasn't sure what. When my friends break the news that Maxwell is coming over at 6, I order a taxi to come to my house then too. The taxi arrives before Maxwell, and I climb into the backseat of the cab, only to find him sitting on the opposite side. I don't understand, I say as tears flood my face with hot anger. It's how it's meant to be, he says as the taxi driver takes off. He takes my hand into his and tells me that it will all be alright and that he'll explain everything to me later. He squeezes my hand 3 times to reassure me, and although I have every reason to be angry at him, I can't help but to feel like he would always take care of me, no matter what. We arrive at the hotel, and he helps me get out of the taxi, walking with me hand in hand to the ballroom where I know that my friends and family are there to surprise me and celebrate my birthday with me. Maxwell leaves me alone for most of the evening as I engage with my friends and I try to act normal. When 11 p.m. strikes, he finds his way back to me. Do you know what's about to happen yet? He asks me as I slowly nod my head yes. Do you know why it's about to happen? He asks. I'm not sure yet, I say sheepishly. It's because you chose this, year after year after year. As many clues that I give you, and as many clues as Lola gives you that this will happen, you still choose the same fate. I think that there's a sadistic part of you that wants to stay with me, even though you know the truth. I don't think that that's true. Why would I choose this? I'll ask you the question that I ask you every New Year's Eve. If you knew that there was a private investigator who caught the murder of my wife through film and then captured me covering up the incident, making me equally culpable, then would you want to live to see January 2nd, 2024, or would you like to relive 2023 and try again to make it right? I look into his eyes, and I see him for the monster that he is, that I know will create the most heinous of crimes in just a few minutes' time. I know his motivation, that he does it to make him look like the bigger villain and to paint me as innocent. Somehow I know that the private investigator is in the room and that he will not live, but that the evidence still remains and that Maxwell is my only hope for safety. Maxwell has the power to rewind the clock, but it is up to me to learn from my mistakes. I remember the times that Maxwell and I had spent together and the anguish I had felt when we were apart. I had given so much of myself to him and for us that to watch it dissipate seemed like a cruel injustice. I give my final answer and depart from the room as a countdown to the New Year's fate commences.